colleagues online. I have the pleasure to open today's exciting conference on PFM tools. The idea of the first session that I will be moderating is to hear the development partners with some introductory remarks, and then we get some insightful presentation about the tools. So without any further delay, let me start by giving Mustafa the word from the World Bank for his introductory remarks.
Thank you, Francesca. Thank you very much, and good morning, good afternoon, everybody. It's indeed a great pleasure to be here with you. It's taking me many years back, and I will talk a little bit about that, but it's a pleasure to join the Global Public Financial Management Tool Conference and PFM Tool Expo and deliver these initial remarks. I had the opportunity to be there in the early days of the PEFA. I started with the Country Financial Accountability Assessment. I don't know how many of you remember that, but we had the opportunity to be there when in the early 2001, 2002, when the PEFA framework was being developed. It's really great to see all the progress that has been made in these past 20 years or so. So this would not have been possible without the constant support, regular support from all of the PEFA partners, France, Norway, Switzerland, Slovak Republic, Luxembourg, European Commission, the IMF, and the World Bank. I would like really to congratulate all of you for the rapid strides the PEFA partnership has made to move into the sixth phase, which started in June 2023. This is a testimony of the effort of PEFA partners and support of global PFM community, that PEFA initiative, with its modest beginning, as I mentioned earlier in my opening, in 2001, and has grown strength to strength in supporting government improve public financial management system. We and the World Bank are glad to house the PEFA Secretariat and will continue to support it in all possible ways. So this conference and Tool Expo is built around the latest and important report on stocktaking of PFM diagnostic tools that was prepared by the PEFA Secretariat. When looking at the report, it inspires in me two thoughts that I would like to share with you as global PFM community. The first one is that there are already many tools, and tool development continue across organization to meet newer demands. The report, as you know, identifies 64 tools in 4 categories in which tools are developed. This is great to see such a level of energy. At the same time, and looking at it from the country perspective, it could be useful if the stock-taking report could be used to trigger thinking into identification of trends and bring together key players in the space of tool development to optimize the effort. This conference can be, in my view, a starting point for such effort. The PFM community can make effort to harmonize tools, optimize the use of the tools, and provide guidance to the countries on which tools to apply and when to apply them. There could be standard protocols used across tool custodians to assess the scale of use and relevance of each tool periodically, so that tools which are out of use are formally withdrawn by the custodians themselves. The second thought that the report inspired me is that when a government needs to use a tool, it should be fit for purpose. This can be enabled with greater guidance on circumstances in which a particular tool can be used. In this regard, further messages from assessment done by complementary tools need to be largely consistent for government to be able to take a decision on implementation. So greater collaboration between tool custodians at tool development stage can enable this process. I believe that this conference and Tool Expo will pave the way for dialogue and further reflections on accelerating improvement in PFM systems at country level. I would like to congratulate the PEFA Secretariat for developing this report and organizing this important conference. As PEFA emerges as a global PFM knowledge hub in its new phase, I believe it will also contribute to knowledge in harmonization of tool development and guidance for use. With that, I thank you all for the opportunity, and it's wonderful to see all of you. And I also thank all of who are watching us online. I hope that you will enjoy the conference and expo, and I also wish you a wonderful day. I look forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mustafa, for these inspiring words, and also for some ideas on the way forward, what the work that needs to follow. With that said, I would like to hand over to Chidem from the IMF to hear her words of wisdom in this regard.
Thank you very much, Francisca. Good morning, everybody. A very warm welcome. So on behalf of the IMF's Fiscal Affairs Department, I'm very pleased to welcome you all to this Global Public Financial Management Diagnostic Tools Conference, to be followed by the PFM Tool Expo, which will showcase the tools from various custodians. And as Mustafa said, there are many, and I will mention a few more. As you know, the IMF will be chairing the next PEFA Steering Committee meeting, which will take place tomorrow and Thursday, and we are honored to be part of today's important event. Thank you for taking the time from your busy schedules to join this event in person here in Washington, and also to attend the meeting via video conference. The PEFA program plays an important role in federating international partners that are active in the PFM world. An important aspect of the Secretariat's work has been to publish indeed reports that give a consolidated overview of many PFM diagnostic tools that are produced by various custodians, by the World Bank, the IMF, and many others. And these are made available to ministries of finance, development partners, PFM practitioners, and academia around the world. The report on the stocktaking of PFM tools, and as Mustafa says, there is a history there. It's been a key initiative since 2004, when the PEFA Secretariat published its first report, drawing a portrait of the rich landscape of PFM tools. And we meet today to discuss the fourth edition, so it's already the fourth edition, which shows all the effort and dedication we have jointly put into producing and improving the PFM tools over the last few years. And this final edition highlights the impressive work we have collectively achieved. So there are 64 tools out of 45 in the previous stock-taking exercise. But let me stress that this work is ongoing, and even since this last edition, we continue to expand our toolkit, and I agree that we will have to harmonize and discuss which ones are the ones to be phased out, or which ones to be coordinated across institutions and custodians. But just to name a few at the FAD side. We have, since 2019, issued a tool to analyze the climate-related public investment management, the CPMA, which has become a really important diagnostic for the fund's new lending instrument about climate, the Resilience and Sustainability Trust. We also produced the cash flow forecasting analysis tool, the CFAT, which helps improve countries' cash management practices. And this is at a time where the cash management, the treasury and debt operations, the coordination between them is so critical. And our long-standing work on macroeconomic and specific fiscal risks has crystallized into the FRAT, which is the fiscal risk assessment tool. And of course, this comes on top of the several tools that we have put in place on specific fiscal risks, such as for the SOEs, discrete and standardized guarantees, and climate. And last but not least, we recently adopted the digitalization guidelines to help governments reap the benefits from this latest trend in public finances. And let me add that at FAD, we not only offer more and more tools to our members, but also provide them in a more complementary way. So we are currently launching the new multi-donor fiscal capacity development initiative called the Global Public Finance Partnership, the GPFP in short. And this fund will pull together the various funding streams we currently have, including from the revenue side. It aims to provide technical assistance with a country-centric programmatic approach across the entire public finance spectrum, and therefore, of course, also across the entire pool of PFM tools. My colleague Teresa will give you a more complete view of our PFM tools with a climate change focus during the panel session later. And I invite you to also visit our stand at the Expo after the conference to learn more about all of the PFM tools developed by custodians. And let me take this opportunity to extend my sincere appreciation to the PEFA Secretariat, Serdar, Srini, and their team for their relentless effort to ensure that the PEFA program really acts as a forum that facilitates exchanges around initiatives and innovations in the field of PFM. And let there be no doubt that although this conference is only half day, the content that we discuss here is really immense, and as the substantial number of tools attest, of course, and of world-class quality. Thank you to all who have participated and contributed to this content over the years, whether through direct production, participation in working groups, and otherwise. And I wish you all a productive day forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chidem, for these insightful words, also with all the new tools also on the landscape. And I think these are is a good opportunity to share with the international community these new trends. With that said, I would like to hand over to Eric from the European Commission, an important player also to applying and using all these tools in the field and at country level. Eric, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Francesca. Not all. First, I would like to extend and to support the words of Chidem, to thank the PEFA Secretariat, not only to organize this event, but also to compile these huge numbers of diagnostic tools, but not only just to have a list of them, but to see where they were used and how they were used, how they overlap, which I think is an extremely useful, but also quite a huge undertaking. As far as the European Commission is concerned, we only use 5 of them. The PEFA, obviously, the PIMA, the MAPS, the TADAT, and the DEMPA. Not because the others have not their own merits and interests, but we are trying to limit our efforts, and I think it's quite already important. Why only 5? Also because these are always the tool that we use to engage with authorities of countries, to engage in a policy dialogue on PFM reforms. These are the tools that also help us to really target the support that we provide, being capacity building, being training, or through other initiatives like the Fiscal Affairs Department and other IMF or World Bank trust funds. And finally, of course, those tools allow us to measure progress over time. And we do that mainly in countries where we do provide budget support, which is the main instrument that we use in many of our partner countries. But also, and more importantly, the priority today is what we have called the global gateway, which is the effort that is made by the EU to finance sustainable infrastructure in countries. That means that we use different financial instruments, mixing grants and loans. And that's the reason why we would like in the future to focus more on aspects that actually we have somehow a little bit neglected in our efforts in the past, which is public investment management, public procurement, and debt management. And there you see why PIMA, MAPS, and DEMPA are important tools. So that's mainly where we want to go. The other effort that we would like to do in the future, which I think is also important, is to focus more on public finance management at sector level. We also see that sometimes when you are talking of health policies, education, social protection, whatever, we see that the importance of public finance management at that level is not always well understood, and we would like to put additional efforts in that. And of course, and that's why the PEFA recent development are important, gender and climate finance, and we are trying, of course, to further promote the gender and the climate modules of the PEFA. Thank you.
Thank you very much on that, Eric. That doesn't leave me much to say then from SECO's side, as you, I think, already said the key positions that we also share. I would like to hand over to Jean, representing France, for his initial words.
Thank you, Francisca. Good morning. Jean Traban. I am working on anti-corruption and financial transparency at the French Ministry for Europe and Foreign Affairs. It's a pleasure for me to say a few words this morning at today's event organized by the PEFA Secretariat. So, echoing my colleagues, Shigdem and Eric, I would like to thank the entire Secretariat's team for their dedication, efforts to make this possible, and for their kind invitation. Thanks to our combined effort and dedication, we established the PEFA program as the standard methodology of PFM assessment as it is today, covering 155 countries, the number of reports published going fast towards the 800 mark. So it is a clear success, and we made it, France, with 6 other development partners in 2001. And in my brief intervention, I would like to explain to you why this is important for our foreign policy to support this diagnostic tool, PEFA, but also others such as TADAT and MAPS. And secondly, I would like to briefly mention a challenge arising in the use of these tools and the way we are addressing it going forward. So first, just to put the things into context, the French support to PEFA should be put into a wider context of greater cooperation in regards to financial transparency and cooperation in the wake of the UN 2013 Agenda for Sustainable Development or the European Consensus on Development. France and the MFA renewed a strategy, an anti-corruption strategy in its cooperation action. That strategy, published in 2021, is made of several actions, such as strengthening internal or external audit control system, increasing the transparency of public procurement, increasing accountability in the management of public resources. And these elements are subject of analysis of the PEFA assessments and are complemented by other specific tools such as the MAPS initiatives, the methodology for assessing procurement system. As part of our external policy, the French support provided to these diagnostic tools is a way to highlight the necessity for reforms that should correct the deficiency revealed by objective and recognized measurements framework. The findings of PEFA assessment should trigger this informed debate on how to correct the failure in public financial management. It should also create new opportunities for in-country and international partners to start a discussion, to work hand in hand to implement reforms with clear impact goals in mind. And in this context, Expertise France, which is the French public agency for the implementation of international project on cooperation, is growing in strength, in capacity to provide partner countries and institutions with experts who will make it possible to carry out both these diagnostics and these reforms. Consequently, the PEFA program is one of the vectors of that policy, of that overall strategy to combat corruption and reinforce governance in our cooperation action. And this is why France contributes both financially and in kind to PEFA by providing an expert to its secretariat since 2006. Similarly, France is also involved in the support of TADAT and MAPS, as I said. Public procurement being one of the government activities most vulnerable to corruption due to the complexity of the process or the sheer size as a share of GDP. We support tools like MAPS, and this support is at the core of our effort to favor economic and financial transparency. So what I wanted to explain to you is, as such, our support to these tools is a way to reinforce the effectiveness of public policies, as to boost the public trust in institutions and in democratic institutions. So this is a really important part of our support to democratic governance. Second, in a few words, I would like to focus on the challenge of enhancing the communication of all the complex and rich data that is produced by these diagnostic tools. There is indeed, in our view, a room of improvement in the communication that could be applied to PFM assessment reports, including PEFA reports. And during PEFA's last steering committee with Srinivas, Francisca, Shidem, Eric, Antonio, all the others in Bern, we had an interesting discussion on how to improve communication on this technical information. We find some solutions, we discussed some solutions such as making executive summary of PFM reports less technical, developing the use of storytelling to disseminate key messages, thanks to, for example, a guide published by the World Bank, this guide to data storytelling in the public sector. The idea is to translate complex series of numbers, expert knowledge, into stories that are comprehensible and relatable to the civil society. So in my view, improving the use of diagnostic tools by the civil society, developing ways to help these tools feed the advocacy of the NGOs, to promote accountability, to promote effective use of public money. This challenge will open up new perspectives, new opportunities for diagnostic tools and greater transparency in public financial management. That is why we have placed civil society organizations at the heart of our cooperation action. And in this context, their enhanced capacity to promote change thanks to these diagnostic tools is one of our main focus in the years to come. So now I look forward to hearing from other speakers, and I wish you all an excellent conference and PFM Tools Expo. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Jean, for bringing up also these aspects of transparency and also the civil society organizations and the broader public. And I think it's one aspect we have to keep in mind as a next step. So how do we share this information with a broader audience within the countries and the societies? I would like to give now the floor to Håkon from NORAD, a long-standing member of PEFA.
Thank you, Francesca. My name is Håkon Mundal. I'm from the Norwegian Agency for Development Cooperation, NORAD. Firstly, let me also thank the PEFA Secretariat for organizing this event and for putting this report together, this stocktaking report. From the Norwegian side, we strongly believe that to support PFM reforms, we need a good understanding of the country context and what the government's needs actually are. And we believe that inclusive and evidence-based assessment of the country's situation is very helpful in that regard. And so Norway has therefore over time supported multi-stakeholders partnerships to develop relevant tools that partner countries can use, and development partners. And this has included in support of the PEFA initiative almost from the start, debt management tools, tools for the Supreme Audit Institutions function, and several tools in the domestic revenue mobilization area, like the TADAT hosted in IMF, and EITI hosted in Oslo. NORAD actually did our own mapping some years ago of relevant tools in the tax area, and this was helpful for us to get an overview of what's actually available out there. And as will be shown in the stocktaking report later, there are quite many revenue tools in the field now. And furthermore, new areas are coming up for attention. For example, the new development of international tax rules that creates new needs at country level. So it seems like the demand for new tools will continue to be on the agenda. And from the Norwegian side, we use these assessments actively at the country level to inform our dialogue with partner countries and on capacity needs, and how we from our side can support this. Several of these tools we have actually also applied for assessing the Norwegian PFM system. We have done ordinary PEFA assessment of Norway, PEFA gender assessment, TADAT assessment, the EITI reports, and assessment of the Norwegian Supreme Audit Institutions, Norwegian Audit Institution, and this has pointed out areas where Norway can improve, the government has done changes late this year in directions of findings also from these reports. But there has also been, I think, some global learning on using the tools on high-income countries. For example, that country context always matters. Norway differ from good international practice in some areas, and where we have chosen not to change. Broadly, we follow good international practice, but what is important is that core function is functioning okay, and that is good enough. But I think by having relevant tools and by doing assessments, this creates important discussions on what kind of PFM reforms that is needed given the country context. So I look forward to the presentation later and the following discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Håkon, for these words and your emphasis on the dialogue aspect. I think it's a very important one that I'm sure we will hear more about it in the upcoming discussions. I would like to hand over the floor to Katarina from the Slovak Republic for her words of introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Franziska, and good morning to everybody. First of all, I would like to highly appreciate hard work of PEFA team and thank for organizing this great event. I also welcome the opportunity to share donors' perspective on PEFA partnership and to discuss this comprehensive report. Slovakia embarked on its collaborative journey with PEFA a few years ago, driven by the acknowledgement of the key role the effective public finance management plays in the development of the country. Our commitment to PEFA reflects our dedication to fostering transparency, accountability, and efficiency in public financial management. We consider PEFA as a crucial instrument for evaluating the status of public financial management, providing a snapshot of the PFM system at a particular time and guiding the reform initiatives of nations. We are glad that it has developed to be much more than that. The PEFA program serves as a valuable source of data, offering public financial management knowledge and practical experience. It has been evolving into a knowledge hub, fostering a community of PFM experts, academics, practitioners, and interested public, thereby enriching the global discussion on PFM. We very much appreciate PEFA's recent focus on research activities on issues that can be essential for government PFM policy. For example, research competition study series provides valuable insights into specific cases and serves as a reliable knowledge source and inspiration, offering guidance for reform initiatives on a global scale. The challenges facing PFM are ever evolving, and the significance of diagnostic tools navigating this dynamic process should be highlighted. The diverse expertise gathered in this room underlines the commitment of each participant to advancing public finance practices, thereby contributing to the overall development and welfare of societies. Now, turning to the report itself, the report is an excellent product that can serve as a starting point for the selection and application of the most suitable diagnostic tool. The document is important due to the fact that there is currently a large number of tools that can be found, and despite best efforts, they could overlap. I can say it is a relatively extensive document. We consider that the report's main added value lies in providing a comprehensive overview of existing tools. At the same time, it remains important to avoid their overlapping and to understand distinctions among different tools. Therefore, for countries that need to be familiar with various tools, we would like to highlight the following parts of the document: a description of individual tools, and especially we appreciate Appendix 6 overview of PFM diagnostic tools by technical coverage. To facilitate the development and strengthening of public financial management systems at the national level, it is necessary for countries to use appropriate diagnostic tools. While the document contributes to this objective, further clarity would be desirable to enhance its development impact at country level. In our view, the additional analysis would benefit from a comprehensive cross-dimensional mapping that can facilitate the selection of the most suitable tool. While the tool's descriptions contain the majority of the information, a comparative table would enhance the clarity, especially in relation to the dimensions such as the form of scoring, evaluation, international comparability, or the difficulty of evaluation, including the country's capacity allocation for it. Also, a guidance when or which tool is suitable for specific countries can be valuable for the particular nations. I hope that the PEFA team or panelists would elaborate on these issues during the course of the conference. To conclude, I would like to bring this topic into the context of the World Bank Group Evolution Agenda, which we monitor very closely and which is of high interest. In terms of update on analytics, it is expected that an expansion of the current public expenditure review to focus on both countries' expenditures as well as revenues will support work on effective and equitable tax structures and domestic resource mobilization. In this regard, we are looking forward to a better knowledge bank and opportunities for collaboration and complementarity with PEFA framework. I wish all of you a very successful and productive conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for these words, Katharina, and also the focus on research and innovative approaches to advance the agenda. Now I'm wearing like a second hat, not just moderating this session, but also talking, representing my own organization, which is SECO, the Swiss State Secretariat of Economic Affairs, a long-standing partner in the PEFA initiatives, but also in PFM reforms all around the world, and especially our priority countries. What I would like to highlight is really how special PEFA is, because for us it is not just an initiative or a program, it is more of a family. And why do I say that? Because we have these discussions in the steering committees that go far beyond just of looking at results and the monitoring approach, but really to evolve the agenda to find new solutions. And I think this PFM Diagnostic study is one example to try to do more than just what is on our books, and to contribute to a global goods and knowledge products. And this is important for us, and obviously with that I also want to thank the PEFA Secretariat, the World Bank, but also all the partners, because we have these open discussions. Everybody speaks out what is kind of bothers them, the challenges we see, the needs to evolve the agenda. And I think this is really unique and special, and we should keep it that way. I just want to start with a little anecdote. And during the last days, I had a discussion with our program manager, Philip, who is in charge of the PEFA initiative. And I said, like, what is this ISOEF? Colleagues from the World Bank will know. And they said, but Franziska, now we have this diagnostic tool mapping, so just look it up, and then you will see it's the integrated state-owned enterprise framework, and you will find information on its kind of objectives, methodology, coverage. So just look it up. I mean, you will present on that, and you didn't look in detail. So, okay, you're right. So the point I want to make is it's really a good reference to get an overview. We have all these abbreviation, all these tools around, and it is a good reference point. What is important, and the colleagues before said it, this evidence-based approach, right? We have to start to know what are the challenges, what are the bottlenecks. And for that, we, similar as the European Commission, we use the same tools with the addition of the Supreme Audit Institution's performance measurement framework, which also then links to Jean's comment on transparency, which I think is a very important topic, especially looking back the years of COVID, but now also Ukraine. I mean, the need for accountability and transparency is high on our agenda, but obviously it's not only on the Supreme Audit Institution side, but throughout the PFM cycle. So for us, it is a starting point, but now, and Mustafa also mentioned it, I think now what does it mean? It should also serve as a coordination platform. And I think in the past we did a little bit more at the PEFA Secretariat and we as partners to coordinate, to see what is done in which country, what is planned. So maybe we have to think as a community to really have this as a kind of focus point for information on the tools. But now what is for us as SECO important is to say, can we also use it as a coordination platform to say, what do we plan, for instance, in Ghana as SECO? And then we should check, well, is the European Commission planning something similar? Is it similar tools we plan within the same year? So is it necessary to do all the tools? Could we do just one? And I think this dialogue is important, and it's up to us. But maybe what is also important, and that's the point also of the civil society and especially our counterparts, the governments, to bring them on board and have this dialogue in country to see what is necessary. But also, of course, then to share the information accordingly. And then my point is we really, what previous colleagues have said, we need to, on one hand, create awareness, but we also need to create the common understanding on the reform priorities. I think for that, all these tools are useful, and to really create the buy-in of our counterparts, because it's all about that. If we just do a tool without their buy-in, it will not advance the reforms in the country. And therefore, I mean, it also depends, do we talk about more comprehensive ones or just a very narrow, drill down, kind of quick and let's say dirty assessment? That's another story. But if it is more comprehensive, I think it is important questions we have to ask ourselves. And in that sense, with what I want to close is PFM is a very technical topic, and I guess we all know that people not involved in the topic are shying away. So we have to do this job to communicate better, to bring in, again, academia, civil society, and to not forget it's a people's business. In the end, it's a people's business, and it's not just a paper we produce, so we need to make it work. That were my words of wisdom. With that said, now we come to the important and interesting part to get more insights on the tool itself, and therefore I would like to hand over for the lead presentation done by Helena and Antonio from the PEFA Secretariat.
Thank you so much, Francisca. I will start. So I'm Milena Ramos from the PEFA Secretariat, my colleague Antonio Blasco, and we are going to present an overview, not in detail, of the latest stock taking that was undertaken by the PEFA Secretariat. So, as you know, we all know that the PFM landscape changed a lot in the last 2 decades. And at the core of these changes are also the emergence of lots of diagnostic tools to support governments to assess PFM performance and embark in reforms. As she then said, this is the fourth stock taking in a series of stock takings, and this time we expanded the scope and mapped the additional PFM functions, tools based on PFM functions, PFM sectors and topics and custodians. I would like also to tell that, for lack of better word, and this took us years, which word to use, and custodians are the institutions that develop, maintain and use tools. So we have 2 volumes. Volume 1 presents the analytical report, and Volume 2 describes the tools, as Francisca was saying, based in a set of characteristics that Antonio will speak about later on. So let's look at the volume number 1. The current stock taking mapped the tools developed up to the end of 2019. It means the cut-off date. And I'm calling this attention because we heard some people saying, but there are other tools. Yes, but we needed to have a cutoff date. And identified 64 tools that have been categorized in 4 main groups, and I will present them. It's important to put a little bit a grain of salt here that the 64 tools include tools that existed already and had been captured by previous stock takings, tools that have been developed between the previous stock taking and the current one, plus tools that already existed but were not captured or included in stock takings and were included now because we expanded the scope. So we are looking at 4 groups. 3 of them were previous groups. There is a new one. Group 1, it's tools, Group A, that cover multiple PFM functions. Group B are tools that focus on PFM, individual PFM functions, institutions or subsystems. We are speaking here about, for example, revenue or investment management. Group C are tools that are developed and used exclusively by the custodians because they assess fiscal risk, and is when the custodians want to assess the fiscal risk of the PFM arrangements of the countries where they are going to have operations. And finally, the new group, Group D, that the tools cover multiple PFM functions, but with a focus on sectors or topics like health, climate, gender. Important or worth noting that not all the tools were developed to be used in all countries. Some tools have a regional focus. And one of them, for example, that is probably familiar to all of us, is the principles, Sigma principles for public administration for the EU accession countries. So the stocktaking also identify what we call resources of promoting good practices, which are resources that are international references of good practices, but they are not formally used, they are not used to formally assess and report PFM performance. Now, who developed these tools? Let's look at an overview of the tools by custodians. 23 custodians developed these tools, these 64 tools, and this includes an array of institutions from multilateral to bilateral agencies, international organizations, as well as regional development banks. 3 institutions manage a little over half of the tools, and they are the World Bank, the IMF, and OECD. These 3 institutions have specific tools of broad-based PFM and PFM to assess also PFM functions, specific PFM functions. And World Bank also has tools that looks at multiple PFM PFM performance in sectors or topics, making it the institution in the world that has the wider coverage in terms of tools. But obviously these 3 institutions have the highest number of country members, and they are an important presence on the PFM arena. We also would like to just very briefly to give you an overview of the dynamics of the tool development in a certain period, which was what was decided when we launched. We are looking at 2013, 2019, and just to let you know that 31 tools were developed on this period, with a concentration of tools in Group B and D. So we are looking at tools focusing on individual PFM functions and sectors and topics. So here there is a trend. And what is important to call your attention is that tools in Group A that look at broad-based PFM stabilized as well as the C, but in A really shows that the existing tools are meeting the needs for broad-based PFM assessments. In terms of Group D, it's also interesting to look at the trend that starting in 2017, 18, and we know that they keep being developed, Group D tools are really now, seem to be really now the focus. So why donors or why development partners and other institutions develop tools? The drivers of tool development remained valid throughout the years, throughout the stock takings, and mainly it's to fill in the gaps. So this based on the feedback from the custodians, it's mainly to fill in the gaps identified in existing tools, but with the perspective of fiscal transparency, for example, the IMF FTE, or PFM individual functions. Also to address demand that was not met by existing tools for specific PFM diagnostic in sectors or topics. Also to reflect on the tools, to reflect and promote international standards like the IPSAS, and to keep the tools up to date, because several development partners updated their tools to expand the subject matter or to include more modules like the revenue module of the FTE, etc. A quick some highlights, but in a quick way. Tools are generally developed for national level, to assess national level, PFM performance at national level. There are tools that are dedicated for subnational and tools that are applied to both, or can be applied to both. The dominant method of application is by custodian. More than half is exclusively used by the custodians. Lots of tools have some form of capacity building, either for the application, support for self-assessment, or post-capacity building initiatives. While transparency, it means access to methodological guidance is good, there is still a way to go on assessing the results of the assessments. And finally, there are very good examples of collaboration among institutions, governments, and other stakeholders in trying to harmonize tools, to harmonize methodology, or to create common databases for data collection. Finally, indicative takeaways from the use of PFM tools at country level indicate that sequencing of different tools is not necessarily a formally structured process, and I think one of the speakers spoke about that. There are different ways to coordinate at country level, different degrees of government participation, but all the development partners access the results of the assessments. If assessments findings are included in roadmaps, it's more effective in terms of coordination. And finally, there are tools that are used to monitor performance over time. And now, Antonio, over to you for the rest of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Elena. Thank you all for being here today. Before starting, I want just to acknowledge Nihan Nakat, also co-author for his significant contribution to the report. Let's look at the usage of tools during the period 2013-2019. The information is gathered based on 41 tools. Some tools have been excluded, like the Group C, that are fiduciary, just to try to focus on the demand and use of the different tools. The first thing that I would like to highlight is that it's interesting to know that countries across all regions and income levels use PFM tools, analytical tools. Regardless, they tend to use the other point that is important, that the countries use a limited number of tools. They don't use, no country use all available tools. So they will be, practically impossible in a certain period. On global scale, the average number of tool uses per country is 5, and the regions with the highest number of PFM diagnostic tools being used are Sub-Saharan Africa and Europe and Central Asia. These regions are closely followed by Latin America. But also in certain, if you look at the income level, we will see that the use of PFM tools is high across all income levels, besides the high income countries that actually we detected, or we couldn't resist the use of PFM tools in 16 countries. 11 of them are from the high income group. The income, the other thing that is interesting, the income group that was usually the most different PFM tools is the lower middle income country, with this maybe another perception, that they use an average of 8 different tools per country. The key takeaways on the analytical part is that the increased number of map tools is not only the 64 we have in the report. We also identified in 2022, when we were finalizing the report, that there were 18 tools under development, and if we consider today, we have even more. So the trend is that tools continue being developed. The main focus of development is very specific, as Elena have said. We have stability in broad type of tools in the Group A, but the main developments are in the Group B, specific functions or institutions, or Group D, that is for specific sectors or topics. The driver is the existing gap or unmet demand, and we identified the use of good practices in tool development, but that is not a norm for all the developments, all the tools we have identified. As just recently said, countries at all income level or regions use the PFM tools, recognizing the importance, and also the importance of the access to information on methodologies on assessments to benefit all stakeholders. We have a section in the report, we call it the way forward. It's the continuation of the recommendation section of the previous stock takings. So we focus on things to emphasize and to look for in the future, and those are basically grouped in tool development, tool usage, and access to information. Let's look at them. First is the elements of good practice in tool development is the mapping of existing tools. I think this is also important to recognize to avoid overlaps, and also to recognize if there is information and benchmarks in other tools that can be used. We have, for example, 40% of the tools refer to other tools. That is mostly you see tools in Group B or D that are specific section or topics referring to broad-based type of tools in Group A. Then the identify demand and consider the tool life cycle. I think this is an important concept. Tools need to be maintained. So when an institution, a custodian develop a tool, needs to also take in consideration that the PFM landscape evolves, and they will need resources to update, maintain, and provide assistance on the tool. Also in the development to take clear understanding of objectives, applicability, and criteria to be used as benchmark. Also, for example, there are very good, some good examples of tool development where they are using information that is available in other databases or tools. That's example of ISORA, the International Survey on Revenue Administration, that is used by some tools as a source of information. Also that in the process of developing to have feedback consultations, and also piloting during the development process. Regarding the tool usage, I think if we take into account the main feature that we need to have use a limited number of tools of all available, then the countries need to plan and needs to sequence the use of the PFM tools. If you consider that a country will use from 6 to 10 tools, then they need to say which tools and when. I think that we also bring back the recommendation that was done in the previous stock taking that is very valid even today. The other point is on the other side of the coin. If you wanted countries to have a planning on the PFM tools they will use, you need to give them information about them. In access to information, this is also important that countries should have access to methodologies and background materials. It's a general practice, but not all the PFM tools have the methodology available publicly, so that's strange. Stock taking should also be, I think, public, is recommended, and the source of information here is not only the one we do in the PEFA program, but also some other examples like NORAD on tax revenue PFM tools. And the public repository of assessment is a good identified good practice. Some tools have this. We recognize the decision on the government to the publication, but also helps a lot if the custodians also helps to keep track of the different reports. Let's look very quickly to the volume 2. Volume 2 is basically the description, as we have already heard from the initial remarks on the tools. The information is divided by group, and basically we have the numbers: 13 in Group A, 27 in Group B, this more extensive group, 10 fiduciary tools in Group C, and 14 tools in Group D. Group A tools, we have the 13, is the broad-based type of assessment like PEFA or fiscal transparency. In Group B, a specific function or institution, we have here like SAIP PMF, already mentioned, or the TADAT. These are the tools. Group C, the fiduciary that the custodians use for purpose of assessing fiduciary risk of the financing operations. And the Group D, that is a new one. It's a new group, but we have already 14 tools in this group. We covered specific topics like gender, climate, and other type of tools. This is an example how the information that Francisca was mentioning, is a structure. Basically, we capture to standardize information. There are 17 characteristics we are grouping in 4 themes, that is objectives and features, methodology, development and use, and the last one, transparency. If we have identified a link to the methodology and the repository of the reports at the moment of the report, the link is included. The report is live in the PEFA website, and you can access the full report or individual tools if you want. The volume 1 is available in French and Spanish as well. I think with that.
And the brochures.
And the brochures, yeah, with a small brochure to explain what it is. So,
thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for those insights. I hope now a lot of people will go to the website and have a look how the report is set up, and have similar experiences as I had when I looked up one of the tools I was interested in. With that, we come to the next program point, and I would like to invite Serdar to moderate the Fireside chat. For those who are not in Washington, a fire would be very nice at the moment as temperatures are low. I don't see the fire, but Serdar is here to guide us through that session.
Great, thank you, Francesca. Let me see if I can put some fire under their feet. So we have discussed a lot of tools. There's a lot of description and the list long. Let's see if these tools are good for anything. So during this fireside chat, we are going to listen to our colleagues from different organizations with their experience on using these tools. Our first speaker is Carlos Pimenta. Carlos is a fiscal economist at the Inter-American Development Bank, and he has a long experience of using different PFM diagnostic tools. Maybe, Carlos, you can tell us how these tools, or if there is any particular one that you want to highlight, help you advancing PFM reforms in your countries. And maybe also as a side topic, you might also want to say something about collaboration between different organizations, whether IDB and World Bank, IDB and IMF, or any other organizations, whether these tools would be helpful in terms of forming a single opinion about what needs to be done at the country level on advancing PFM reforms.
Thank you very much. It is a pleasure to be here to discuss these important PFM diagnostic tools to support country reforms and institutional strengthening. It was a surprise to me to find 64 PFM diagnostic tools, in the report, 19 more since 2016. We probably use 5 to 10 of these tools at Inter-American Development Bank to support Latin American Caribbean countries. We use the PEFA, including the climate and the gender chapters. We also use the IMF Public Investment, PIMA, with a component of climate too, the TADAT for tax management, and the OECD procurement tool maps, and others, in general. I've read in this document that Latin American Caribbean region is the 3rd region with a higher number of PFM diagnostics after Sub-Saharan Africa and Europe and Central Asia. This is excellent, considering it's very important to have information about PFM in other fiscal areas to use in our projects. IDB participates in the assessments using these tools in Latin American Caribbean countries as a reviewer of the documents, but sometimes with a direct participation in the teams for the assessments. And then this is a good opportunity for dialogue with the countries and donors or international organizations, as you said, now for implementation of these tools. At this moment, we can coordinate with our colleagues in other organizations. At the IDB, we use these diagnostics for design and the evaluation of our project operations in policy-based operations to support reforms in the countries, but also in investment operations to measure since the beginning of the projects, the baseline and also the indicators, goals, outputs, outcomes, and the impacts of our operations in the region. We also use these diagnostic tools in the preparation of research studies or our knowledge documents, additional literature review, and the specific surveys we apply in the region. For example, this year we support the Treasurers Network for Tegal in a specific survey, and also with the Budget Authorities Network with another survey about the result-based budgeting, and we will publish a paper about that in the next weeks. To finalize, I want to mention that today we have much more resilient and transparent public finances in the governments compared with 30 years ago, and better fiscal institutions in general. And these PFM tools had an important role in this progress. We must recognize this. The use of these tools also contributes to increase the institutional capacity in the countries, institutional capacity on PFM, promoting better diagnostics, baselines, indicators, policy dialogues, and an integrated vision of the situation of each area on PFM. And integration, it's very important. Beyond budget, treasury, public accounting, debt management, we must promote more integration with the other systems as procurement, human resources management, mainly the payroll, and asset management, investment systems, and others. Now to continue to improving PFM contribution for development, that this is a very important point in the agenda today for international organizations, donors, and countries. It is important to increase the use of PFM information in public management decisions overall. because with all these systems, we produce a lot of data, but sometimes just to make payments or fiscal control, we must use this in public management decisions overall. And to better support development goals at sector level, as mentioned my colleague from the European Commission, we must be more integrated with the sectors, or with more integrated with the sector's administrative systems, because health, education, security, all has specific systems, and we have this central PFM systems that must be integrated, no? To have using performance budgeting based on results, but more integrated with these sector systems too. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Carlos. Now I'm going to turn to my colleague Fernando Blanco. Fernando is a lead economist at the Macro Trade and Investment Global Practice of the World Bank, and they are the custodian of some of these tools, like public expenditure review, or we call it public finance review these days, as well as debt management performance assessment. Fernando, what are your observations and insights on these tools, how we can use them more effectively? As Carlos highlighted, especially the issue of better integration of systems and sectors.
Sorry. Thank you very much for the invitation. And before answering your question on how countries are applying our tools, I would like to make a small digression on the PFR, on the background of the PFRs. As was mentioned by Katarina, we are in a phase of revamping our older public expenditure review, now our public finance review. And after a stock-taking exercise that we did in 2021, we revised 125 PRs that were produced between 2015 to 2021, and we have a diagnostic of what was and what were the main achievements and also the main weaknesses of our tool. And basically, despite that PFRs or PRs in the past were our main diagnostic core of the bank, is a very traditional tool that we have more than 30 years of doing PRs. And it was also is still it has a critical role on the policy dialogue with government. So our effectiveness on that is very important, because we do the diagnostics, but also we attach to policy to our developing policy operations. So the impact is perhaps rather different from other tools. Is more direct, because we identify reforms, and we use these reforms in our policy programs that we do in the development policy operation. So the role was critical. But still, with that and with all this tradition, we found some problems on our PRs, and this is why we are revamping them. One of the issues was the quality was a little bit heterogeneous. In the past, we have very strong PRs in some countries, in regions, and others that were not too good. The other issue that was that, despite was linked to operations and to policy reforms, we didn't have a track record of what a PFR was suggesting or recommending back in 5 years ago, and now what is the status of these reforms that we suggested or identified. We didn't have a track story of the reforms that were implemented, etc. And when I see, because my first PR was in 23, I remember, and then I did several ones. What I noted is that in several countries, a PR that was done in 2023 was exactly the same in 2027, because reforms didn't happen. And that was one of our things that we noted. No? I did several in several countries, came back 10 years after, or as a peer reviewer, and the issue seems to be the same. And that is something that I think that affects not only the PRs, but also all the tools that we have. Also, when I was in Africa, I worked a lot with PEFA, and still the reforms that at the beginning seems a lot of enthusiasm. You do what we call in Africa baby steps in some reforms, but then you get a plateau on the reforms and things that don't happen. And this is something that we are trying to improve with the new PFRs. The second thing that the new PFRs have, and I think that is part of the evolution roadmap of the World Bank, is the need to focus on revenue mobilization. And we have a very strong component now. Our new PFRs will be focused on of course, on the expenditure side, but also we are adding the revenue side that for us is critical. The PFRs became now mandatory for the 15 IDA countries that have revenues that are lower than 15% of GDP. So we will need to do this periodically. Every 4 years will be part of the World Bank engagement. And I think that we expect that with that, our effectiveness in identifying reforms, helping countries to adopt the reforms, and follow up the results of this reform will be much stronger than the past. My last comment is that we use a lot PFRs as are more a broader diagnostic. We use, and several PFRs have the different tools using in our diagnostics. We use DEMPA, we use PEFA. Some of our PFRs are informed by PEFA, and I think that this is other thing that perhaps it's the 64 tools are okay, but if they don't talk each other, and if one's don't inform things, that will be difficult to manage. No? The coordination is difficult. And the last thing that I working in IDA countries for a while, what I noted is that these instruments are very useful in donors coordination. All the budget support groups that we have in Africa, for example, at the beginning were just PEFA because it was the only diagnostic that we have. But then I think that this has been very important. All donors budget support operations should be coordinated by these tools. All the support should be informed by that reform, as we do with our PFRs and our development policy operations. I will stop here and happy to answer any other.
Great, thank you, Fernando. Now we will go across the street to our sister organization, and we are going to ask Teresa about her experience. But I want to particularly, building on Fernando's point about tracking the results and tracking the results over time. I take this as a little bit of a self-criticism on ourselves. Do you guys do a better job at the fund in tracking the results over time?
I'll answer that one at the end. So okay, so first, thank you for the opportunity to speak on the panel. I think, as we already heard today from the very, very good and clear presentation from the PEFA Secretariat, that the IMF has for several decades been working on development of diagnostic tools. Probably the most well-known ones are the Fiscal Transparency Evaluation and the Public Investment Management Assessment Tool, which several people have already mentioned today. In addition to these tools, which are diagnostic tools, I should say we also develop operational tools. These are ones which really help governments in their day-to-day management, such as our cash management tool and our fiscal risk tools as well, which we'll talk about outside in the expo. So I would say most recently, ministries of finance are kind of expanding their agendas to cover emerging priority areas. So increasingly, they're looking at mainstreaming into different policy areas, new things such as sustainable development goals, gender equality, and climate change. So I'd like to take the opportunity of this panel to highlight one of our tools, specific tools, and that will be the CPEMA, and looking a little bit about our tools in relationship to climate action. So the IMF as an organisation, as well as I think everyone around this table, is committed to the green agenda and supporting countries to address climate change. In this context, last year, the IMF board approved the establishment of the Resilience and Sustainability Trust, the RST, and this provides financial support to countries to address climate-related long-term structural challenges. The resilience and sustainability support programs that are required to produce high quality and effective climate-related policy measures. And they usually focus on 5 areas. So that's climate mitigation, climate adaptation, climate financing, green PFM, public investment, and fiscal risk management practices. So one of the tools that we've used extensively in countries requesting programs from the RST, but not just is the climate PEMA. And I should say it's not just for the RST. There's broadly countries that are interested in public investment and climate change, and that nexus is really the climate PEMA we've mentioned. So the climate PEMA is a module of our infrastructure governance tool, the PEMA, which I also mentioned. And it basically helps identify reforms in public investment management, looking for more climate responsive investment, planning, resource allocation, and project implementation. So the Paris goals require significant infrastructure investment. So climate investment requires a number of specific institutional capacities to ensure that the investments are aligned with your climate objectives. So integrating climate into public investment institutions enables, basically, in our view, the development of better quality and climate-aware investment. So the climate module of the PEMA, what this PEMA does is it identifies climate-related gaps in public investment management. It provides recommendations to close that gap and to strengthen the existing processes. So let me talk a little bit about how the tool operates. So the climate, it evaluates how a government's public investment management system incorporates climate change policies. It's looking at five key institutions. So that's the planning aspect, coordination, appraisal and selection, budgeting, portfolio management, and risk management of public investment. So each of these 5 institutions have 3 dimensions that are assessed, much like the standard PEMA, which you're familiar with. And they can be assessed as met, partially met, or fully not met, partially met, or fully met. And the average of these 3 dimensions is produced into an institutional score. These are discussed as part of missions and dialogue with the countries, so it's an engagement process. Both we present what the PEMA framework is, and we conduct missions to conduct the frameworks, and the authorities' views and discuss their findings. So the outputs from the PEMA is really a detailed report summarising the results. It has comparative charts, it has heat maps to show how you perform comparatively, and it has a table of recommendations and an action plan. So to date, we've conducted 42 climate PEMAs, and we're now seeing countries draw on the recommendations from the climate PEMAs to give examples to enhance, for example, enhancing their appraisal and selection criteria and strengthening broadening their investment projects pipeline process. Now, what we often see is gaps in core public investment management processes, especially appraisal and selection. And these gaps generate significant challenges when it comes to integrating climate sensitivity into projects. So in essence, challenges with the basic PEMA system, when you're trying to introduce climate change, climate focus, it's still going to be the issue. So recommendations also perform a dual purpose. That is, they strengthen the public investment management to improve public investment efficiency while really incorporating this climate sensitivity into those processes. No, even despite that challenges, I say results have been encouraging. It's still at the beginning process. This climate PEMA is relatively new. It is proving to be a tool which is helping governments identify potential improvements in institutions and processes to help build low carbon climate resilient infrastructure and to help with those closing those efficiency gaps. Let me take the opportunity to highlight a few examples of recommendations that countries are now working on to improve their public investment management system and introduce a climate focus. I'd say some of these recommendations have also been incorporated as part of the Resilience and Sustainability Trust programs. So they're benchmarks or performance reforms as part of those programs. And these include, for several countries, for example, Costa Rica, Jamaica, and Rwanda are working on developing guidelines and standard methodologies for climate analysis and project appraisal. There are countries which are these countries are also working on defining and publishing project selection criteria which integrate climate considerations. Other countries such as Georgia have already worked on this and published the results. Some countries, for example, Rwanda and Senegal, are working on climate budget tagging to identify and track climate-related expenditures. And Jamaica has a reforms measure as part of the RST to publish a fiscal risk statement with quantitative analysis of climate fiscal risks. And this is, we've just given them follow-up TA to help them introduce that change. I say Costa Rica is also working on quantifying climate risks. So in parallel with the PEMA, which I've just described, we are helping governments to strengthen their PFM processes and systems in the context of climate change, and that's through our Green PFM framework. This is an approach, I would say it's not a diagnostic tool. So Green PFM framework offers guidance to governments to integrate climate perspectives into the PFM frameworks and systems and processes. We have successful examples of combining both the CPEMA tool with our Green PFM framework approach. So we've gone to countries and worked on both simultaneously. And the examples of that were the Ivory Coast, Kenya, and Jordan. In these cases, the understanding of a country is broadened, which is a positive development in creating kind of a comprehensive action plan. We've also combined our work on Green PFM and Gender PFM in missions, for example, to Burkina Faso and Turks and Caicos. Let me just emphasize one other tool. I'm not going to go into detail, and that is the Crewcraft tool. This helps governments conduct analysis of medium and long-term implications of climate change risks under different climate change scenarios. And we've more information on that in the expo outside. So I'm not going to go into all the tools, so you'll be delighted to hear. And in the interest of time, what I'd say, we've more information on the CPEMA and the PEMA generally. You should look at our infrastructure governance website, which we've published PEMA and CPEMA reports there, along with our handbooks and questionnaires. There'll also be some brochures that colleagues have at the expo that I mentioned, and we encourage you to go out and talk to them today to ask for more details on these tools. So that's a summary really of a tool we think is quite important. It hasn't, again, the cutoff deadline 2019, which makes lots of sense given you already had 64 tools. So this is a tool which has come after that point in time, but it is supplementing and adding to one of our core tools, which is the public investment management assessment. To answer your question earlier, I think in this example, because this tool is very key to the Resilient and Sustainability Trust, a lot of them are including these benchmarks or reform requirements are included as part of that program. They are actually being quite closely monitored as part of these IMF programs. So in that case, that's an example of monitoring and follow-up in that case. On our other tools, we do also have monitoring and follow-up because, for example, from the PEMA, which we do work with the World Bank on, the World Bank is part of the PEMA as well. We do also do a lot of follow-up missions trying to implement the recommendations on this, and the World Bank is also, in fact, I think had follow-up even loans and programs based on the PEMAs we've had. So in that case, there is some follow-up and monitoring on it. Okay, thank you very much. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Thank you for answering my question also. Now we are going to turn to Thomas Solomon, who is a senior PFM advisor at the USAID, and Thomas is also an advisory board member of the PEFA Secretariat. So he's going to give us his independent view of PEFA right now. Thomas, can you please share your reflections on opportunities to use PFM tools for enhancing PFM reforms in countries?
Yeah, Serdar, thank you very much for the introduction, but also for inviting USAID, probably for the first time around this table, and we are very excited to be part of the conversation. USAID, as most of you might know, traditionally is known as for humanitarian assistance and development assistance, not necessarily known for public financial management focused activities, but since its establishment in the 60s, in all the programming that we work, whether it's agriculture or conflict prevention, humanitarian assistance, education, health, all of these activities are activities that typically governments should do for themselves, but they are not able to. So we intervene in those. And in all of these programs, there is intersection between the programs themselves and public financial management. So we have actually been doing a lot of public financial management capacity building activities throughout the world. We are present in close to 100 countries. But in recent years, more and more, there's a focus on working on public financial management capacity building, and we are now partnering with a few institutions. This year, for example, we signed an MOU with the Intosai IDI to work with us on Supreme Audit Institution capacity building. We also signed an MOU with the OECD MAPS and started funding actually for the first time, which we are excited about. And now we are also represented in the PEFA Advisory Board. So there is a lot more focus. In terms of the tools themselves, I'm actually surprised to see that USAID made it to the chart and not put in the other categories. We do have 3 tools that were developed, and my colleague Lisa Fleischer from our health office will be showcasing one of those tools, which is a guided self-assessment public financial management performance tool. We also have another tool that's called Collecting Tax Database, which basically collects information on tax collection from over 100 countries. This has been a tool that's been in place since 2008, and we've been tracking, and those are kind of critical for the kind of work that we do, that the USAID does. And we have one other tool, which is called the PFM RAF, the Public Financial Management Risk Assessment Framework, which is a fiduciary assessment only used by USAID for the purpose of government-to-government assistance. It's a congressionally mandated assessment that we have to do prior to providing assistance to different governments. So that being said, in terms of how we use the tools, apparently we have only 3, but we use a ton more tools that are out there, including the PEFA, the DOT, MAPS, and all of the assessments are related to a particular specific programming. A lot of our programs are focused on local level, subnational level, so tools that are focused on those levels of government are more important, but the use of the tools first and foremost is to inform our country development strategies in different countries, as well as specific programs that we work in. So we heavily rely on those. Another way we use these tools is that it really serves as a platform for USAID to engage with governments and other stakeholders in having discussions of public financial management reform. We spend quite a significant amount of money in supporting PFM reforms, whether it comes as a result of a PFM article for consultation or a PEFA assessment report. Sometimes we get a little bit disappointed when we don't have the reports, when the reports are kind of outdated, because we rely so much on them. However, we still use them as a reference point to do our programming. And probably the other way we use the tools, specifically the PEFA framework, is in countries where we don't have up-to-date or current PEFA assessment. We hire our implementers or contractors to do a PEFA or public expenditure assessment using the PEFA framework, for example. So even if the PEFA Secretariat is not involved, in Georgia and Kosovo, for example, we've done probably about 5 to 8 municipalities of public financial public expenditure assessment using the framework that PEFA provided. So not only the reports, but the framework itself is very useful for us to use. Another point that I want to make, as being the only development agency, I think, on the panel, we obviously focus not necessarily on return on investment, but on improved service delivery with countries. So a couple of things. One is to have a continuous assessment that are not necessarily outdated would be very helpful for our programming, specifically PEFA, because that's the number one report that we go to. And also with tools development, I think consultation prior to the assessment itself with development partners would be helpful. We oftentimes hear of an assessment after it's done, but there may be some contributions that USAID could make because we have experts, both national and expat experts in country that could be of assistance, but also we would like to be involved in terms of how we can help these tools, whether it's financially or technically. The other point I want to make is maybe this is more of a question for those who develop the tools. We have 64 tools, and I can see assessment fatigue with partner countries with all these tools. Are all these tools used in a way they should be used, but also how can we minimize the impact it has on partner countries when we do the assessment? So just a question and point to maybe for Srinivas and others to sort of point, how do we avoid that fatigue from countries? Because we do see that happening in many places we work in. So with that, I conclude my remarks.
Thank you, Thomas, and thank you for helping me segue into my question to Srini. Now we are going to hear from our head of PEFA Secretariat, Srini. I have to give you a little bit background. Since I joined the new unit, since I started the new unit, I have been having this heated debate with Srini. So I'm going to ask this question publicly to him. I'm sure he's going to give me a hard time afterwards. Srini, could you please, Srini has a long experience on PFM, both inside the bank and on the government side. So I want to hear Srini's views on what does a good PFM system do? And how can a PFM tool present convincing evidence that good PFM is good for something?
Thank you. Thanks, Sardar. That's a great question and wonderful to see all of you and join this conversation. Simple answer, as of now, from seeing all the PEFA reports and all the deep dive tool reports that come in, a good PFM system is a PFM system which works, which delivers, which enables the policy intent of the government to happen, to be translated into action. Now, what's the news going around from what I see as the trend? The good news is PFM systems work. If we take 2001 as a watershed movement where development partners came together, dropped several of the existing tools at that point of time and converged behind PEFA, and since then track the progress of PEFA, the trajectory has been continuously improving. So PFM reforms are working. Even during COVID-19 time, when many of us were initially, when COVID started, we thought, will PFM systems fail? Because of PFM systems, will governments fail in delivering? Eventually, it didn't happen in a big way. It was, which means, again, PFM systems did deliver during COVID-19 with a mixed kind of a result as such in some cases. Then is PFM system really translating into improved development outcome? There is enormous amount of evidence today already in place. For example, how much a percentage points improvement in PFM systems leads to improvement in, say, health sector outcome or health service delivery. There is evidence on that, which actually says essentially that something which all of us as PFM players, as PFM custodians, tool users, that whatever has been happening is working. Then to what extent it works, if we take that question, so the global report on public financial management issues by the PEFA Secretariat, if we add up all the PEFA scores, the aggregate global score would be something like a C. Many think C is not good because why C, why not A or B? But C, according to PEFA lingo, is basic level of performance, for which we need to be very happy about that. There are basics in place in many countries and on an aggregate level. At the same time, obviously, we know that there are many areas for improvement. So from my standpoint, where is it that's missing? What is probably not working, actually, when tools are working, PMF systems are working, what's it that's not working? Probably if we unpack, if we take a PEFA perspective, we need to unpack from an indicator level to a dimension level and even into a detailed level. Then the questions would come up like, why so many countries still do not know how much arrears they have? Why commitment controls are not still in place in a country? Why Accountant General Office is not in a position to produce a financial statement 3 months after 3/4 of the countries in the world who do PEFAs, 3 months after the end of financial year, still you don't have accounts submitted to audit. So these are the kind of issues. There are several very basic issues which we probably would need to and should have addressed, probably are not still addressed, and they're lying there in place despite so many PFM reforms being successful. Why is it the case? My own personal experience and take is that probably there is this pull a little bit between what is more a kind of a large big bang reform, which a lot of countries, there is a lot of energy behind it, when compared to many aspects which are very basic, which can be resolved at a kind of at a very lower level by attending them directly. For example, if you need a treasury single account, do you need a new IFMS system in place? If you need performance audits to come in place, do you need essentially an audit management software to enable that? This kind of a disconnect is one thing probably which would enable us to get the basics faster, better, but at the same time, what I see globally is there is convergence happening. So, this question about multiple tools, are they working well? Yes, actually, most of the time what I see is a new assessment is building on the existing literature and the narrative is feeding in. Now, the only problem of occasionally one sees is probably it is not going into the micro level of the issue that need to be dealt. The broader aspects are all being very well dealt, which is translating into reforms which are working, but the micro level still probably remains in many countries, and conferences like this and develop collaboration between all of us would probably take us forward towards that. Let me just close my comment by mentioning 2 new things that we will be coming up soon in the new year as we go into the new year. The new version of the Global Report on Public Financial Management is going to come up, which again is going to unpack a lot of these issues moving forward. And very happy to also that like many of you have been using PEFA Climate. We heard about CPMA. PEFA Climate is now very close to finalization. In the new year, we expect that to also come up as a final. Right now, it is being used in more than 20 countries, and the numbers are growing, and that would come out in the new year as a new product. With that, thank you, and turn back to Sardar.
Great, thank you, Srini. I should admit, Srini is always energetic and providing good answers to good pushback to my healthy skepticism, and I'm not skeptical. It's my job to push the team towards that direction. But I want to highlight one area of research from our colleagues in the health unit. Our colleague Moritz Piatti and his team they have published an IDB working paper looking at health outcomes and PEFA or PFM systems proxied by PEFA. They have found significant positive correlation between health outcomes, especially under 5 mortality, maternal mortality, and everything. So that's the line of research I think we should be pursuing in order to show the results, convincing results. One of the issues we are facing from I was in a region before coming to a global unit. You go in front of a country director, and we have one here, previous country director, ask for resources to do another assessment. And the conversation, if the person is not coming from the PFM background, the conversation turns really difficult in the sense that there is always, a healthy dose of skepticism. I think we need to do a better job producing evidence, concrete evidence, so that we can convince skeptics on PFM issues. I sometimes fear that we come across a little bit of faith-based, so I want to push frontiers on that front. With that, I want to turn to the audience for questions and answers. We have 10 minutes, and maybe we can extend another 5-10 minutes. Please feel free to turn on your mic and direct your question either to one particular panel member or all of them. Do we have questions online? No, that's only streaming. Please.
Hello. Hello, yes, thank you. My name is David Robbins. I'm with the International Budget Partnership, where I manage the Open Budget Survey. First, I wanted to congratulate the PEFA team on this report. Really interesting, really fascinating to dive into some of these tools, some of which I'm really obviously very familiar with, some of which I'm less so. The survey, like most of these tools, is built around a framework and a set of standards. And one thing that we've seen when engaging with governments around the results is a challenge to the framework, a challenge to the standards. We invite governments to provide comments, and I won't name them, but I've seen a government go through all 250 indicators in our survey and say, for each one, this does not apply to our country. Each one. They took the time to do that, right? And these are international standards endorsed, written by the IMF, by the OECD, by people, by institutions around this table. And I look at the report, and I look at 64 and growing instruments, and I see a danger of governments picking and choosing what tools to pay attention to and what tools to use, because some of these tools are going to perhaps paint them in better light than others. And so I guess I'm to the panel, I think I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that. If perhaps that fear is overblown, or if you've seen that before, and I guess maybe thoughts on what can we do as a community to counteract that. Thank you.
If I may add my question, piggyback on the question, one of the things that I observe, if an assessment tool is producing a score, that's usually when the countries become more defensive, and they always use, oh, I'm better than my neighbor. How did you give me a C, give the other neighbor B? So that's, rather than looking at this thing, I call it, for particularly PEFA, I call it, it's an X-ray. When you go to the doctor, you say, I have a problem here. It looks at the X-ray and says, okay, this is the problem. Take this medication, you get better. To me, the tool is an X-ray. Then you have to take the medication. But rather than that, many countries focus on the score itself, and that makes the assessment just an index number, whether it is ordinal or cardinal, whatever number it is, they just look at that number and ignore everything else. That's where they become more defensive. Go ahead, please.
Thanks, sir. That's a great question, both the questions. So let me make a quick thought. So how do I see, I have worked in Africa earlier, and I have seen in a country which is a hot favorite for tool-based assessment, Zambia. So Zambia probably had all the assessments ever there. But how does all this add up? So what I have seen there is clear realization within the government that different tools play a overall role, but eventually giving different messages. But it all needs to converge from the ownership of the Secretary to Treasury, for the permanent secretary, to determine which reform actions are to be taken and how to be taken. I'll turn back also to my distinguished colleague in the PEFA Steering Committee, senior most Hakun. In Norway, we always quote Norway example. Norway did a PEFA, got a score on internal audit, if I'm not wrong, a low score, and formally announced and published saying, no, we are good with this score for now. We do not want to move. So the move need not be on the necessarily on the score, but on what reform to be done, because the compensating controls for that particular reform control are already in place there. So this maturity in approach is something which from the PEFA Secretariat we are more and more encouraging. We also have a product called From PEFA to PFM reform. How do you transition? And it's not a mechanical movement of all Ds to Cs, all Cs to Bs, and all Cs to A, but which dimensions and which aspects to improve, and even tolerating some things which will go down as such. So this is obviously a learning curve, and the rigor to which at a country level this discussion takes place after a diagnostic assessment is where we see the real action taking place.
He told us the half of the story. Do you want to present the other half?
Yeah, okay, thank you. What did Norway actually do? Well, it's true that we after the assessment there were some low scores. We have had several high scores overall. But it was a little bit different how the government reacted. On the internal audit, it's true, we got the feedback from the government that now we can use our control system and improve it, and we can live with that. But I can also say that 10 years afterwards, we have started to build out the internal audit function. So it took us 10 years to be ready to do changes. But there are other areas that we can live with low scores. For example, we don't have a formal multi-annual budgeting system, and we can live with that because we have other complementing future analysis that gives information that we can live with. So it's a mixed picture, but it's true. We didn't jump on every scores to improve. Thanks.
No, thanks, Seda. I think you raise an important point. I just want to offer two perspectives. You know, I used to work on FM and PFM and then went to do the country management side. And I think the point you made is very valid. And what it really raised, I think, David, the point is when you are on the countryside, the Ministry of Finance, you see the plethora of, diagnostic tools and so on. I think what will be important really is to help the Minister of Finance with the decision tree. And that's why I put in my opening remarks the need to have a better understanding of what tool for what circumstances. I think that will be definitely helpful for the country. I mean, it's probably okay to have all these tools, but understanding when to use them for what I think will be important. And I will go maybe, Srini, just to support my friend Seda to attack a little bit more. I think you have to go maybe from, you mentioned from PEFA to PFM reform. I will go even beyond that and say PFM reform for what? I think that's really what will be important for the Minister of Finance. Because if you don't answer that question, there is a danger to gaming the system. How do I improve my PEFA score from B to A or from C to B? The question really is, what do you want to achieve? Is it having a better efficient management of public resources? or improving your tax collection or whatever. I think that should be maybe the starting point, and that will also help with the decision tree to see what instrument do I want to use. And one question though, given my experience that I haven't heard from the discussion, is I have come to realize that it's not just a technical solution. I mean, if it were just a technical solution, all the countries will be scoring A. And there is a more of an implementation issue, a political economy dimension that does not come out very clearly in some time in our discussion. Having that understanding from the beginning would definitely help, you know, on the moving to the PFM reform, and also having the impact. And the question that was asked to Teresa by Serdar about what impact do we seeing, or when Fernando say, you know, we are not making progress. We have been making this same recommendation for 10 years, but we are not making progress. Understanding the why, I think, is quite critical.
Thank you. I think this conversation is very important, and I just want to highlight two points from the IMF, like how do we do. And for this, I want to mention about the FTE and the PIMAs, which were mentioned as these general tools that we have. So for us, and I think for all of us, the country should be the one who understands what kind of diagnostic they want. We shouldn't be going there with a diagnostic just because we deliver a very nice tool, but because there are issues and the countries identify. So I think this first approach of general diagnostics are very important on this. But as you say, it's an X-ray. And then you have to decide, you as a country have to decide, okay, this really is painful and this really showed that I have an issue, and therefore I'm gonna work on this and I'm gonna take, as you mentioned, the medicines. So I think understanding the difference between diagnostic tool and the reforms that come after the diagnostic and the country being in the driving seat, it is very, very important. I think the other issue that I want to highlight, and for us has been really important and a feature that countries like very much on the PIMA, on the Public Investment Management Assessment that we have done over 90, is that we have a differentiation between de jure and de facto. So we do the assessment, and in this assessment we say, okay, in paper you have this, and that's the first, the institutional design. But then we go and do an extra effort to measure what we call effectiveness. And it's, okay, you have the law, but is the law really helping on this? You have X regulation, but is the regulation being applied? And this de jure and de facto allows countries to, first, not necessarily you have to reinvent your systems every time. Sometimes it's because you haven't done the additional steps to really implement the reform you are supposed to implement, or you need to make adjustments in which beyond systems you have to have the different actors working together. So I think that is very important in really going to effectiveness of the diagnostic tools and the reform program. And the third point, just to complement what Serdar said, we don't rank countries. We use the information to create peer groups. So if we are in a low-income country, we make some charts about peer groups without really showing the ratings. I think when we are rating and publishing these rankings, that is a different story, and that is a difficult one. I mean, because of course, if countries are going to be put out there with these are my scores, they will take differently the indicators to where we are trying really to understand what is the issue and move on a reform agenda. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I think that's really important to help them to digest information and find the ways to help countries on the reform agenda. As I said, probably a shortest PEFA report is at least 100 pages, if not more, right? And nobody reads the 100 page and they look at why did I get C here? So that's always a source of contention. I don't want to monopolize the microphone. Please, do you have?
Thanks. Thank you so much, and congratulations again to the PEFA team. I am from the Open Budget Survey team as well, along with David. My question here is quite general, and it's to the PEFA team. If you could, to the authors of this report, if you could shed some light on if you found any overlap between these diagnostic tools. And I'm asking this because I imagine all of them are resource intensive, and how, if you have any recommendations for what we could do about that overlap. Thanks.
Thank you. That's very, very good question. First of all, the part of the work was first identifying the custodians. The team preparing the report conducted more than 100 interviews with the people trying to understand the tools. We are not experts in every tool. That will be amazing, but no. So, but we divided the tools in technical areas, and you can see in certain areas. I will not want to point out any culprit, but if you look at the group B group and the revenue technical area, you will see there are a lot of tools. So one of the questions also we have, and one of the recommendations is also the phase out of the tools. Some tools are developed but are not active. You know, it just remain in the, I would say, tool universe. But you know, that's why we are saying that the institutions developing the tools need to care, and also we are recommending extensive benchmarking and mapping of other tools, just to avoid that type of overlaps. One story is, for example, the PEFA. The PEFA was a multilateral initiative, and several tools were surveyed and were compared. One of them, for example, it was mentioned by Mustafa, the CFAA. The CFAA was the instrument from the World Bank to assess public finances at country level. It was replaced by the PEFA. So there is a good practice also when you develop a tool to have a dialogue to see if some part of the features can be absorbed or can be followed. And we have some examples of that as well, reflected in the report. But certainly, if you, okay, for example, some things that have overlap also for the focus. For example, you have a CPIA here in the bank. You have the CPIA on the African Development Bank, covering African countries. So we have they even called the same. So you need to also think on the purpose. And some tools I developed with specific purpose for a specific region, for a specific set of countries, member countries, that they could maybe have some technical overlap. But saying that is not the whole story.
Anybody from the Thomas? Do you want to comment, or?
I was just quickly going to comment. First of all, thank you for the IBP folks. We are great partners. We have used your reports, you know, in so many ways. But I think, David, to your question, I was just going to comment on that. I'm sure the time has passed. But I think education is critical in countries. I've been going around the world and talking to Ministry of Finance folks and the central bank folks and others that are involved in public finance. And when they see the word assessment, for example, for many people in developing countries is like an audit, right? They consider assessment and audit in the same way. I'll give you an example. I was talking, I won't mention the country, but I was talking to a Deputy Minister of Finance, and we were talking about the need for them to actually be on the Open Budget Survey. And they said, no, we don't want to, but the country has a significant foreign exchange shortages, and they're looking for ways to get some money into the country in terms of FDI or credit or whatnot. And I say, this is a very casual conversation we had, and I say, what do you think creditors would want to see when they are trying to decide whether to lend money to the country or not? The first thing they see is their budget. Budget transparency is the first thing they see. Don't you think it would be good for the country to get access to credit, access to FDI, if you had a transparent or some level of transparency where people and folks could look into? And it immediately clicked to him, and the next year in 2021 they actually became listed on the OBS for the first time ever. And that simple conversation tells me that there's really a lot of misunderstanding by country officials. They may not necessarily understand the way we do, and when they say this doesn't apply, they actually probably mean it. We just understand it differently. Another example would be, I was talking to an SAI audit head, and I asked him, how do you think your SI is in terms of independence from the executive? He said, completely independent. And I said, okay, so we went, and then when we get to the budget, do you actually submit your budget request to the parliament without the executive being involved in it? Oh no, it goes through the executive decides how much money we should get. Well, there is your independence gone. So this also is another misunderstanding of the term, the word we use. So education of the partner country officials, I think, is critical, because they don't necessarily we assume that they understand the way we do. They don't, in most cases that I've been involved in. So sorry.
No, thank you for invoking the Supreme Audit Institution. There is a delegation waiting for me downstairs from Intosai, and I've been late for the last 13 minutes. So I don't want to be more rude to them. And thank you for attending this important event. Yes, and I'm going to turn it to Dimitri, and can I excuse myself? And I'm really sorry, there's a group waiting for me. I have to run. Sorry. Dimitri, over to you.
Thank you, Serdar. If you can project the last couple of slides on the screen. Thank you. In addition to thanking all the speakers and panelists who were part of this conference, we would like to extend a special big thanks to all the representatives of PFM Diagnostic tools that have accepted our invitation and kindly set up their tables right outside this room. We received confirmation from more than 20 tools custodians. As you can see on the screen, we have several tools from IMF, USAID, International Partnership, Budget Partnership. Next slide, please, Antonio. And a few tools from the World Bank and IFC as well. It should be noted, though, that unfortunately, because of the logistical implication, we were only able to invite those tools whose custodians are based in Washington, D.C. area. And still, we have a good number of tools participating in today's expo. Another interesting detail is that some of the tools represented at the expo were actually developed after the cutoff date of our Stocktaking report. And thus, it's another reason for PEFA Secretariat team to ensure that the report is kept updated on a regular basis. Without further ado, please join us at the expo and take this opportunity to get more familiar with the different participating tools and to ask any question you might have about the tools and the best way to apply them in your respective areas of expertise. Thank you again for being with us.